Mayor Pete, people won't talk about it, but the gay thing, no support from black guys. The black guys are not voting for a gay white guy to be president of the United States. And it's like Democrats won't acknowledge it, but you just look at Mayor Pete. First of all, his resume is not very impressive. But when you actually look at his appeal to minority voters, no one voted for him who was a minority. White people, woke white people love Mayor Pete because he reminds them of themselves. I mean, honestly, but he has no chance. I think it's Newsom. I think
Cory Booker may want to get involved.
Cory Booker is not very likable.
I'm not like on the Cory Booker campaign here, buddy. I'm just saying they're going to have to come up with something.
I think it's Newsom. Joe Biden may declare an emergency climate declaration today because he is floundering. And in particular, he's floundering in ways that even the left wing in this country can no longer defend him from. The poll came out today from the Trafalgar Group. They have Donald Trump with a 5-point lead over Joe Biden. That is the biggest lead that Donald Trump has ever had in any poll over Joe Biden that I have ever seen in the history of polling between those two men. And it's not just that. CNN came out with a poll yesterday evening. It has Joe Biden's approval rating at 38% and his disapproval rating at 61%, which is frankly unheard of. That is worse than Donald Trump was at this time in his presidency. And yesterday on CNN, they were at a loss to even explain how bad of an outlook that provides for Joe Biden. Here is CNN discussing a new low in polling for Joe Biden.
Numbers show that many Americans share a somber outlook on the state of our nation. Let's bring in CNN political director David Chalian to help us break it all down. David, what's the mood of the United States right now?
Yeah, somber is a good word, Jake. Sour, totally disappointed, disgruntled. Any of those words gets at how bad Americans sort of perceive the state of things right now. How well are things going in the country today? Only 21% say things are going well. I want to put that in some historical context for you. 21% is the low point. This goes back, in fact, off this chart, Jake. You have to go back to 2009 to find a time when the American electorate was this dissatisfied with the way things were going in the country.
Buck, it ain't good. And even CNN now is sitting around. I mean, when you talk about getting to over 60% disapproval, that's hard to do. And in order to get out of that hole, you have to get people to change their minds. And it's hard to get people to change their minds once they've made them up.
You're seeing regime media, with CNN leading the way on this, recognizing now we're going to be in August here really soon, that they have to psychologically prepare the emotionally fragile audiences that they've been trying to tell Biden's doing a great job. They've been trying to tell them that for the last 18 months or so. Now it's starting to turn more into Biden's doing the best he can, but it's probably going to be a rough midterm, guys. You can start to see it seeping in there. And it's even more clear because of what we keep talking about, which is the media palace coup of sorts that could be underway here, where they decide that they're going to turn public opinion from within the Democrat Party against a second Biden run. So I think the machinery is all working in the way that you would expect. They cannot turn around overall perception at this point because of the economy. And even if the economy wasn't this bad, crime, the border, there are a range of issues that I think would be a huge drag on Democrats going into this election cycle. But they're having to psychologically prepare them. It's like, you've been a coach, I've been a coach. When you're going up against the city or the state champion and you love your guys and you want them to do their best, but you're like, this might be a tough one, guys. Just so you know, we're going to do our best, though. That's pretty much where Democrats are going into this election.
And it's getting bad for Joe Biden. Buck, early in Joe Biden's tenure, do you remember when the defense for why comedians weren't making fun of him was it was almost impossible to find anything to make fun of him about? Do you remember that was literally their
There's nothing
defense.
funny about Mr. Magoo. It's not like there's a whole cartoon about him.
And so they said, "Oh, we can't. I mean, he's just so impressive. There's just not very much to make fun of." Well, the gloves are off as Joe Biden's approval ratings have tanked. If there's one thing that comedians are loyal to, it's whatever the audience says that they respond to in a positive way. They're going to do more and more of that. Even Jimmy Fallon, who I think it's fair to say is the least political of the late night show hosts. He said he talked about Fauci retiring, and listen to this joke.
Meanwhile, I read that Dr. Fauci said that he plans to retire by the end of President Biden's term. Yeah, then everyone turned to Biden like, is there anything you'd like to announce too?
All right, so Buck, that joke, you heard people laughing. The fact that Biden should step down is now a comedic punchline, and a lot of people kind of uncomfortably laughing there. That's a Jimmy Fallon joke that certainly would not have happened in the first year of the Biden presidency.
It is remarkable as well to see that they're all turning almost in unison, right? It's as though there was a memo that went out to the regime media, which includes the late night, quote, comedy shows. Jimmy Fallon seems to make the most authentic effort at being funny as opposed to just, Stephen Colbert should be on MSN. His show should be on MSNBC.
Yes.
Right? It should just be it should be right after. I don't even know who's on. Who replaced Maddow?
It's a great question.
I don't even know who's on MSNBC
who replaced
anymore.
Maddow. That's not good for MSNBC that we can't even name her replacement.
I know they do have a Republican or two, a former Republican or two, because that's something that always amuses libs, to have fake Republicans trashing Republicans for a paycheck. But I think that the problem the Democrats face right now, I spoke to a friend of mine recently who is a left-wing Democrat about this, and we're going through who are the options. And when you really start thinking, you go down the list, and I even looked at who was running in the Democrat primary, which really doesn't feel like it was long ago, right? This is all coming on pretty quickly. You think about who were the top candidates. Biden's problem is he's too old, okay?
Yep.
And there's other problems too, but that's the one that's just inescapable. It's obvious. Water is wet. Biden is too old. Okay. You can't have Bernie then, folks. All right, it's not going to be Bernie.
He's too old too,
right?
Yep.
He's too old, obviously. So that's just not going to work. Why make that change? Elizabeth Warren is borderline.
I think she's too old.
Too old, right? She's maybe a 3 or 4 years younger than Biden, but also too old. And remember, you could say, "Oh, well, what about Trump?" Talking about Democrats replacing an incumbent. Okay, forget about what Republicans are going to do, and then you look down the rest of the list. Obviously, Kamala would be the obvious choice.
And she will run, so she will throw her hat into the ring if Biden steps out, but nobody's enamored of Kamala.
I know last night on Tucker's show, he put out there the two big blue state governors who actually won elections, so that gets rid of Hochul, right? Because Hochul was just there. Hochul is just somebody they're like, we need a governor because the last Democrat governor, Cuomo, was grabbing too many people. And so now you have Pritzker in Illinois and Newsom in California. Who's the most formidable candidate that the Democrats could put forward to take over for Biden at this point? I think you have to agree that it's probably Gavin Newsom, which sounds crazy, but who else?
Yeah, I think it's Gavin Newsom, and I think you're right. Mayor Pete, people won't talk about it, but the gay thing, no support from black guys. The black guys are not voting for a gay white guy to be president of the United States. And it's like Democrats won't acknowledge it, but you just look at Mayor Pete. First of all, his resume is not very impressive. But when you actually look at his appeal to minority voters, no one voted for him who was a minority. White people, woke white people love Mayor Pete because he reminds them of themselves. Honestly, but he has no chance. I think it's Newsom. I think J.B. Pritzker,
Cory Booker may want to get involved.
Cory Booker is not very likable.
I'm not on the Cory Booker campaign here, buddy. I'm just saying they're going to have to come up with something.
I think it's Newsom. I think Newsom would end up being the nominee. And the thing about Newsom is I question his ability to analyze anything on a political nature because of that stupid ad that he ran in Florida that was so tone deaf against Ron DeSantis over July 4th.
But here's the thing.
He would be a
you and I both have to deal with this, right? There are blue checks on Twitter that come after you who have hundreds of thousands of followers, and maybe you'll take a swing back. And then there are the blue checks that have 300 followers, and you're like, or 3,000, and you're like, I don't really care. Newsom, I think, was punching up, and everyone saw that, right? Meaning that by trying to attach himself to DeSantis, who is the leader of Republican governors right now. I know Trump is still the de facto head of the Republican Party for a majority of Republicans today, but if you're talking about governors, it's clearly DeSantis in the lead on the governor side of things. Newsom wants to be considered that among Democrats, right? He's from the biggest state in the country, the biggest blue state slash state in the country. So for him, I think it's an elevation to even put him in the same ring, so to speak, as DeSantis. The problem, though, for Newsom, I think, Clay, becomes, one, the policies of California and the outflow, which is obvious.
Yes.
And then also, how does Gavin Newsom play in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin? I don't think he plays very well.
I don't think he does either. I think he would get trounced, but I think he's the best option that they have. I don't that they would select. The best option that they have is actually the guy that they hate, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin would actually play well in the red states. You know he's going to win the blue states just because he's a Democrat. He has 0% chance
but he
of
wouldn't
being
give them what
nominated.
they want in office for them. That's why they, you know what I mean? So for them, that's a lose-lose.
But Gavin Newsom would have to pick, because we know that all the Democrats care about is cosmetic diversity now. Like, he'd have to pick a minority female running mate.
You think he goes with
right?
Stacey Abrams as his running mate?
That's my first thought. She loses. She loses in Georgia. Now, if she won, she would
Clay,
run, and she might be the nominee.
Excuse me, sir. She's going to be in her second term as the fake governor of Georgia.
She was down 7 points in the most recent poll. I don't think it's going to be particularly close in the governor's race. I think the Senate race between Herschel Walker and Warnock is going to end up being close. I think Herschel Walker is going to end up finding a way to win because Georgia Republicans are so fired up. But I think Stacey Abrams is going to lose. The funniest one to me, Buck, is the Beto-Stacey Abrams ticket. Neither one of them can win anything in their home states, but they all raise $100 million or so from New York and California people. Beto plus Abrams, the losing ticket of all time. I could see that happening.
Look at Biden. The lesson of Joe Biden is you can be a clownish loser in presidential elections. Biden, I was invited just as a spectator to a cocktail event in D.C. when I was the CIA, and I just went. I think someone brought me as a date or something. I don't even remember now. It was Biden, Kucinich, and someone else whose name I can't even remember. He was at that level running in 2008. Yeah. He was at the Kucinich level of like 1% support. So the lesson of Bidenism is if you just stick around long enough and you don't care about anything other than being there, maybe you can win.
Remember, Biden blew up in 2008 because he said Barack Obama was the first black candidate who was, I think, clean and articulate. I mean, that was Biden in 2008, and his entire presidential campaign imploded. The only reason he had any viability at all was because Obama decided to make him his VP.
The best, in quotes, moment that Kamala had in the last election cycle was trashing Joe Biden as an old white racist on stage in front of the whole country. That was the only moment anybody, and that was when she was like, I'm obviously a top-tier candidate. Well, not so much, it turned out, but nonetheless. We're going to stay on all this, friends, because, man, we are heading into a fascinating political cycle here.
After being unable to accomplish anything that Joe Biden has campaigned on, the president's approval rating is now hovering somewhere between long COVID and Uvalde police departments. And making matters worse for him is a runaway inflation, right? Especially when it comes to gas prices. The prices of gas are so high that these days driving is the entire date. It's just like, he really spoiled me last night. We drove all the way from my house to the end of the block. Ow. He's so romantic. But here's the thing. Until gas prices improve, neither will Joe Biden's approval rating.
There you have more comedians, or a comedian among many, making jokes about this Biden administration. Welcome back to Clay and Buck. I'm Buck, he's Clay, and what we're seeing is that the regime media is no longer circling the wagons they have in the past. And there's this one part of it, there's all this, oh man, things are going so badly in the country right now. Things are so rough out there. Ha ha, let's make some jokes about it. Yeah, we told all of them that this was going to happen. We said Joe Biden doesn't understand business, the economy. All he understands is how to keep getting elected in the state of Delaware as a Democrat and how to make jobs happen for Hunter. And now we're supposed to just say, oh, who could have seen this coming? Everyone listening to this, Clay, saw it coming.
I saw it coming. I'll be honest. I didn't think it would be this bad.
I agree with that. Same with me.
I mean, it's hard. Every decision that you make as president is a difficult one, right? Because it is true that if it makes it to your desk, it was something just like the Supreme Court. It was something that couldn't have been resolved by everybody below. But it's like Biden flipped a coin and he called the wrong side every single time, which is virtually impossible to do. You watch a sporting event, most of the time, two good teams end up being relatively competitive. Biden is like the guy who's getting blitzed 52-3. He made the Super Bowl, and then every decision that he's made since he got to the Super Bowl has been wrong. And it is kind of remarkable to see how incompetent he has been. Even with low expectations, he has come in beneath them.
It's stunning. I mean, in a sense, got to give him credit. He keeps setting new records just in the wrong direction, just for things you don't want to set records for. So there's that. It is a memorable presidency. The Biden presidency memorable in all the ways you don't want to be.